Hello guys, I hope you're all doing very well today, and welcome to this video where I'm going to be talking about Cocaine Bear. Now, when I saw the adverts and the trailers for this movie, it kind of looked like a very generic movie that was just based on the fact that it was just a bear doing cocaine, and the idea around it was just this bear on cocaine that is high is just on this sort of killing rampage, just basically finding anyone to kill. But overall, I actually enjoyed the movie. I actually think there's slightly more to it than just that. And I also really liked the fact that they integrated some black comedy into it, which actually made it quite hilarious to watch, and it kind of hooked you in. So overall, I enjoyed it. Now I'm gonna talk about the premise and the plot of this movie. So basically, what this movie starts out with is that you have a drug smuggler who is on a ship, and the name is Andrew Thornton II. And basically, he's on on this plane with duffel bags of cocaine, full of cocaine, and he basically tries to use a parachute to jump out of the plane with all this bags of cocaine, but it all fails. So he basically hits his head against the plane, causing him to fall backwards off the plane without his parachute, and that concluded basically him dying. And all the cocaine has now been scattered around the forest, but his body is basically lands in Tennessee or Knoxville, Tennessee, where basically a detective identifies his body. And what happens now with all the cocaine that's been dropped is lands in the forest where basically a black bear all of a sudden sniffs it. And when it sniffs it and basically spots any civilians in the forest, then he goes onto this sort of aggressive killing rampage that basically it will start attacking people. Now, in this film, you're also introduced to other characters. So not only you have a detective trying to solve a case of all these packages of cocaine, but you're also introduced to a mum and their daughter who are basically trying to change their weekend plans to go up to town, and they somehow stumbled across being in the going into the forest. And basically, you have the mum, you also have the daughter with her friend, and they also see all this cocaine that's around in the forest, and they also get into a situation where they're being chased by the bear. You also have rangers in this film that's introduced, who's basically looks after the forest, and you're also introduced to other people who are some of the other people who are kind of fixers of the drug smuggling. So you're introduced to a few other drug smugglers who are trying to sort of reclaim all the packages of cocaine that's been spread across the forest, and they try and get into the forest and get into a situation where the all of a sudden they realize the bear is somehow sniffing cocaine and going on this rampage. So there is a lot more to this film with all the other characters in it. So I'm going to kind of talk about some of the things that I do generally like about this movie. Um, Firstly, what I do like about this movie, it is very comedic. So they definitely get some of the black comedy pretty well. The way they kind of react to some sort of weird situation of a bear getting high on cocaine. I think they kind of get some jokes as well where you get involved with the two kids in this movie and they see the packages of cocaine and they were kind of like, oh, what you do with it and everything like that, and it was kind of hilarious. So I definitely think the comedy aspect was there in this film, which I personally did find funny. So that's something that they did get right. I think some of the visuals of the blood and the violence, as well as some of the limbs coming off, I did actually think they did that pretty well. So all in all, those things were pretty nicely done. Now, kind of talking about maybe some of the things that I wasn't so funded on with this movie is I do feel some of the dialogue in the characters are pretty repetitive, and some of the characters' backstories are they don't really sort of get the story of their background very well. So it's all just kind of just sort of fleshed in really, and it just spills into just one big scenario of them all in the forest and just trying to smuggle all this cocaine. So I think the side where you have the mum and their daughter and the mum's daughter's friend is kind of based around that fact that the mum is trying to find a daughter who ran away from the bear, and they stumbled across their friend who was stuck in a tree, and they just somehow need to find where her daughter is. And then you have some of the drug smugglers who are trying to get some of the drugs to sort of use as the cash, and they try and get into the forest trying to find those drugs, but then stumbling upon, they find the bear that was using those cocaine packages, and they kind of get into a situation as well, and they kind of integrate it in to the ending, which I think kind of looked decent. I can't really say it was the connection really was there, but it kind of worked in a way that it was somewhat a bit underwhelming. So I think some of the characters, like some of the actors, did well. I mean, most of the time when you see at the beginning, you see O'Shea Jackson Jr.'s character. He's always a bit self-concerned about his dress and what he wears. So sometimes when he wears his Jordans, he would somehow stumble across on stepping on ketchup and water, and he would like, oh, just got these, oh, so bad. And there was like one time where he was wearing his I think it was like a basketball jersey, I think, and somehow there was like blood all over it, and he gets really like pissed off about it. It's like, oh, you know. So those sort of things was kind of a little bit just kind of dragged on a bit. But also, I do think Ray Liotta's character was good, but never really had the screen time for some weird reason. He didn't really have so much time on the screen, which I think was a bit of a strange one. So he plays as like one of the other drug smugglers in this film, and he kind of sets them out to go onto this forest. But his screenplay was very short. You only see him in the beginning and the end. So yeah, those are some of the things that I kind of had a little issue. Very minor though. But overall, I do actually think this movie is actually enjoyable to watch. And I think for anyone that's into the dark comedy, blood, gore type movies, I actually think this is a decent one to watch. So, overall, I'm going to give this movie a 7.5 out of 10. I think that's kind of like the fairest way I could put it. It doesn't sort of stand out from any dark black comedies I've seen before. Or, the other ones that you might see, in the past, like from other types of films making before. But I think this is one that definitely, if you're seriously into these sort of dark comedies, I definitely recommend you watch it. But I know for some, it's not always going to be their sort of cup of tea, really. Some don't really like the blood and the gore. Some people would find it a little bit too intense. And maybe the premise of the idea of the movie is kind of weak in that aspect, where it just kind of focuses on one aspect of just a bear being high on cocaine in the forest, and everyone is somehow panicking over it. But overall, I enjoyed the movie, and yeah, that's about it. See you later.